The morning I handed my son a check for $240,000, he hugged me for exactly 4 seconds. I counted. I was so happy I didn't care. I thought, this is what mothers do. We give. We don't keep score. I was wrong to stop counting. My name is not important. What's important is that I am 63 years old. I taught third grade for 31 years in Dayton, Ohio, and when my husband passed 6 years ago, I became the kind of woman who fills her quiet evenings reorganizing the same kitchen drawers just to feel like she's doing something. My son. I'll call him my son because that's all he ever was to me. A son, my boy, my whole heart, had moved out to Phoenix 2 years before that check. He'd met a woman at a conference. She worked in marketing. She had opinions about everything, and she said them the way people say things when they've never once been told they were wrong. I liked her at first. I want to be honest about that. She was sharp. She made my son laugh in a way I hadn't heard since he was a teenager. On their first Christmas together, she sent me a candle set and a handwritten card, and I kept that card on my refrigerator for almost a year. I tell you this because I need you to understand I was not looking for a reason to dislike her. I wasn't that kind of mother-in-law. I had watched enough of those women in my own life. Bitter, territorial, impossible to please, and I had promised myself I would never become one. I was going to be the easy one, the generous one. And I was. God help me, I was. When my son called me in March and told me they'd found the house, 4 bedrooms, a backyard big enough for a garden, and a neighborhood with good schools even though they didn't have children yet, he said they were short on the down payment. The numbers in Phoenix had gone wild. Everything had. He asked if I could help. Just a bridge, just to make the numbers work. I had money. Not because I was rich, but because I had spent 31 years barely spending anything. Because my husband and I had paid off our own house, and when he died, I sold it, and the equity sat in an account I didn't know what to do with. I had been waiting for a reason. I told myself that for years, waiting for a reason. My son was my reason. I wired $240,000 on a Tuesday afternoon. My banker looked at me across the desk with the expression people use when they want to say something and decide not to. I signed the paperwork. I drove home. I made soup for dinner and watched the evening news and went to bed feeling, for the first time in a long time, genuinely useful. My name was on the deed. That part was my son's idea, actually. He said the mortgage broker had recommended it because of my credit score and my assets, and that it would help them get a better rate. I didn't ask too many questions. I should have. But I didn't. I just signed where they told me to sign, and I went home and I made soup. That was 14 months before the visit. My son called me in September to say they were finally settled, finally unpacked, finally ready for me to come see the house in person. We'd done video calls. I had seen the kitchen, the guest room they'd painted a color his wife called sage, but looked gray to me. The backyard where they had plans for a patio. I had admired all of it enthusiastically through a phone screen, and quietly longed to stand in it myself. I booked my flight on a Sunday, Phoenix in October. People always say the heat breaks by then, and it does, mostly. Though 68 degrees, there still feels like standing next to an oven to a woman from Dayton. I told myself it didn't matter. I was going to see my son's home, the home I helped build, the one with the backyard and the 4 bedrooms and the good schools. My son picked me up from Sky Harbor just before noon. He looked good, tan in that Arizona way, a little lighter around the eyes than I remembered. He hugged me at arrivals and said, "Mom, you look great," which is what people say when they haven't seen you in a while and don't know what else to open with. I told him he looked great too. We meant it. We were happy. The drive was good. We talked about nothing important, the flight, the weather, whether I wanted to stop for lunch or wait until we got to the house. I waited. I wanted to see the house first. It was beautiful. That's the honest truth. I'm not going to pretend otherwise just because of what came after. It sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac with a stone front path and a big sycamore in the yard that must have been there for decades. There were window boxes with white flowers in them, which I later found out my daughter-in-law had put in just 2 weeks before my visit because she'd seen them on a home design account she followed. The front door was dark green. It looked exactly like something from a magazine. My son pulled into the driveway and said, "So, what do you think?" "It's perfect," I said, and I meant it. He carried my bag to the door. I followed him, still looking up at the sycamore, at the window boxes, at the neighborhood, nice cars and driveways, sprinklers on timers, someone a few houses down raking leaves. It felt like a good place. It felt like somewhere a family could grow. We went inside and his wife was in the kitchen. She hugged me hello quick and practiced, and offered me sparkling water before I even had my shoes off. The house smelled like those reed diffusers, the kind that cost $40 and smell like nothing in nature but somehow still managed to smell expensive. Everything was clean and arranged and deliberate. I was trying to take it all in when my son came up beside me quietly, almost casually, like he was going to tell me where the extra towels were, and said, in a voice low enough that his wife couldn't hear from the kitchen, "Hey, Mom, a few of our neighbors might stop by this week, or we might see some of them at the block party Thursday. I just wanted to mention, and I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but could you just, I don't know, not mention that you're my mom? Just for now. Just tell them you're an old family friend. It's just easier." I turned and looked at him. He was already looking away, adjusting something on the hallway table that didn't need adjusting. "Easier," I said. "It's complicated. They have certain, I don't know. Just trust me on this one, okay? It's not a big deal." He walked back toward the kitchen. I stood in the hallway with my carry-on bag still on my shoulder and a $240,000 deed with my name on it somewhere in the filing cabinet down the hall. And I thought, say something. Say something right now. I didn't. I set my bag down. I followed him into the kitchen. I accepted the sparkling water. And I told myself it was fine. That there was probably a reason I wasn't understanding. That I would ask him later when we were alone. Later didn't come the way I expected. The next morning, my son left for work at 7:30. His wife worked from home, mostly in the room she called the office, the door mostly closed. I made myself coffee in their kitchen, quietly, trying to remember which cabinet held the mugs, and I sat at the breakfast table and looked out at the backyard and thought about what I was doing there. Nobody had asked me to come on the walk they took that evening before dinner. Not exactly. It was more that the conversation was already happening, the leashes were already out, the door was already opening, and there simply wasn't a moment where anyone paused and said, "Do you want to come?" I sat in the living room and read a novel I'd brought and listened to the sound of the neighborhood through the window. It was fine. It was all fine. Thursday came. The block party was in the cul-de-sac folding tables, a rented bouncy castle that no one seemed to be using, a man at a gas grill in an apron that said, "Grill Sergeant." My son introduced me to 4 different couples and twice said, "This is my mom's old college roommate," which I had never agreed to, and which was also impossible, given that his mother was 63 and college roommates don't typically age 60 years apart. The third time he started to introduce me, I put out my hand first and said my own name, just my name. I didn't add anything to it. The woman I was meeting, a dental hygienist from 2 doors down, very kind, very chatty, didn't ask for elaboration. I did not say I was his mother. I also did not say I was a college roommate. I simply existed at that block party as a woman who was there, which was true, and said nothing about the rest of it. My son found me later by the dessert table and said, "Thank you." I nodded. I ate my brownie. I watched him move through the party, easy and comfortable, slapping the grill sergeant on the arm like old friends. He was embarrassed by me. That was the thing I had been refusing to understand. It wasn't that his neighbors were judgmental or complicated. It was that he had built a life that didn't include a mother. A mother would have made the story messier. A retired school teacher from Dayton with orthopedic shoes and a soup pot and the habit of getting up before 6, that wasn't the narrative he was telling. I understand now why it hurt so much. It wasn't the words. It wasn't even the block party. It was that he had been very careful, and the careful thing he had built had no room for me in it. On Friday afternoon, while my son was at work and his wife was on a call, I took a walk by myself through the neighborhood. The sycamore on the front lawn looked different in the full afternoon light. Enormous, patient. The kind of tree that had been there through everything. I walked for about 40 minutes. I thought about my husband. I thought about the kitchen in our old Dayton house, the one we sold, the one that funded a down payment on a home where I was introduced as a college roommate. I thought about my name on the deed. It wasn't vindictiveness. I want to be clear about that. I'm 63 years old, and I have been a third-grade teacher for 31 years, and the one thing you learn from children is that the point is never punishment. The point is understanding. The point is learning that actions have weight. When I got back to the house, I called my attorney from the guest room with the door closed. I had a simple question about the deed. She had a simple answer. The call took 11 minutes. I didn't change anything that day. I didn't say a word about it to my son or his wife. I finished my visit. We had a nice dinner on Saturday night at an Italian place they liked, and my son ordered wine and we talked about his work, and I didn't bring up the block party or the college roommate introduction or any of it. His wife showed me pictures on her phone of a rug she was thinking about for the living room. I told her the blue one was better. She said she thought so too. On Sunday, my son drove me back to Sky Harbor. He carried my bag to the curb. He hugged me and said, "We'll do this again soon, Mom. Maybe Christmas." "Maybe," I said. I flew home to Dayton. I heated up soup. I had made a big batch before I left, the way I always do. It keeps well in the freezer. I sat at my kitchen table and ate it and watched the evening come through the window and thought about the word maybe. I didn't hear from my son for 3 weeks. Then he called on a Wednesday evening, and he was friendly, and we talked about nothing much. And at the end of the call, he said casually, "Oh, hey, do you remember signing some deed paperwork when we bought the place?" "I do," I said. "We were thinking about refinancing, and the broker mentioned your name is still on the title. We were going to clean that up. It would just make things simpler. I can have the attorney send you something to sign. It should be pretty quick." There was a silence. "I'd want to think about that," I said. Another silence. "Think about it," he said. "Mom, it's just a formality at this point." I said I'd want to think about it. He didn't press harder that night. We said goodbye. I hung up and sat for a long time in my quiet kitchen, in the house I still rented in Dayton, because I had put $240,000 into a down payment in Phoenix. And I thought about what I wanted to say, and how to say it in a way that was honest, without being cruel. I called my son the following Sunday. I asked if we could talk, really talk, and he said yes, and I could hear in his voice that he already knew something was different. I told him what I had noticed during my visit. I didn't say it with anger. I didn't feel angry, not exactly. More like a deep and tired sadness that had been sitting in me for weeks. I told him about standing in his hallway with my bag on my shoulder and hearing him ask me to be a stranger. I told him about the block party, the college roommate story, sitting alone in the living room while the leashes came out. I told him that I had come to Arizona to see my son and had spent 4 days feeling like an inconvenience. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Mom, I didn't think it was that big a deal." "I know," I said. "That's the part that worries me most." More quiet. He said his wife was very conscious of appearances. He said the neighborhood was competitive in a way that was hard to explain. He said he had grown up, that his life had a different shape now, and he wasn't sure sometimes how to fit all the pieces together. I told him I understood all of that. I told him I was not asking him to choose between me and his life. I was asking him to not be ashamed of me in his hallway. He started to cry. Not dramatically. My son was never dramatic. Just quietly, the way men sometimes cry when they've been holding something for too long. I let him. When he was finished, I said, "I love you. I'm not going anywhere. But I'm also not signing anything yet. And I'd like you to think about why." His wife called me 2 weeks later. I almost didn't answer. She was different on the phone than she was in person. Less polished, a little uncertain at the edges. She said she owed me an apology. She said she hadn't realized how things had looked from the outside, from my side, and that she was sorry about the block party. She said it in the stilted way of someone who has been asked to make a call and is trying to do it right. I thanked her. I meant it. It was a hard call to make, and she made it. My son and his wife came to Dayton for Thanksgiving. They slept in my guest room. She helped me make the pie. On Thursday morning, she asked me to show her how I make the cornbread stuffing my son had apparently been talking about for years, and I stood in my small Dayton kitchen and taught her, step by step, the way my own mother taught me. My son stood in the doorway watching us, and I caught his eye, and I saw something in his face that I had not seen at that block party in October. Something that looked like it might eventually become the man I raised. In January, I signed the refinancing paperwork. Not because he asked. Because by then, I trusted that we were working on something. Not finished. We are not finished. Families never are. But working on it, which is all I ever really wanted. The sycamore in their front yard lost its leaves that fall and came back in the spring. My son sent me a picture of it in April. Big green hands of leaves against the Arizona sky, and wrote underneath it, simply, "Thought you'd like to see this." I did. I liked it very much. I have thought about that block party many times since October. The folding tables, the man in the grill apron, my son moving through the crowd like he belonged there completely, and me standing near the dessert table, eating a brownie and saying nothing about who I was. What I've come to understand is this: the way we treat people rarely stays private. It finds its way back, not as punishment. I don't believe life works that neatly, but as consequence. My son asked me to disappear into the background of a life I helped build, and for a few days I did. I was quiet when I should have spoken, but being quiet is not the same as not noticing. And noticing, I've learned, is its own kind of strength. There's something I want to say to anyone watching this who has been asked to make themselves smaller for someone else's comfort. The ask is never really about you. It's about their own fear. Fear of being judged, fear of not fitting in, fear that the people they become won't hold up next to the people they came from. My son wasn't ashamed of me. He was ashamed of himself, though it took him a while to find the words for it. That's a distinction worth sitting with. What saved us, what I believe genuinely saved the relationship, was not what I did with the deed or the refinancing paperwork. It was that I chose to tell the truth plainly, without theater, without cruelty. I waited until I could say it calmly. I came to see my son and spent 4 days feeling like an inconvenience. That sentence was harder to say than any of it. It required me to be honest about my own hurt instead of burying it under politeness, which had been my first instinct. Politeness, I've learned at 63, can be its own form of avoidance. My son cried quietly on the phone that night. He is not a dramatic man. That quietness, the fact that he let himself feel it rather than argue past it, told me more about who he still was than anything else he could have said. I signed the refinancing paperwork in January. Some people who hear this story think that was naive. Maybe, but I signed it because I was paying attention to his wife standing in my kitchen learning the cornbread stuffing, to my son in the doorway watching us, to the small and ordinary things that tell you whether someone is actually changing or just waiting for you to stop watching. I know the difference. 31 years of teaching third grade will do that to a person. What I carried out of all of this was not bitterness. It was clarity about what I'm willing to accept and what I'm not. About the fact that love, real, lasting love, does not ask you to vanish. It makes room. And if someone is asking you to vanish, that is information. It is not a verdict on your worth. It is information about where they are, right now, in their own growing up. My son sent me a picture of the sycamore in April, just the tree, big green leaves against an Arizona sky. No long message, just, thought you'd like to see this. I did. Some things don't need more words than that.